Hey everyone, and welcome to SkillCapped. My name is Dr. Zora, and this is the ultimate beginner's guide to playing one of the most pivotal agents in Valorant, and that is the controllers. For those who aren't familiar with who the controllers are and what they do, Riot describes them as experts in slicing up territory to set their team up for success. The current controls available at this time are Omen, Brimstone, Viper, and Astra. Each of these agents play the same role, however they each have their own unique ways of fulfilling that role. We're going to break down how to use controllers the right way and how you can take advantage of each controller's abilities to absolutely dominate your opponents. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Going right into our question of the day for y'all, since we're discussing about controllers in particular, which controller is your favorite to play? My personal favorite is Omen, and I'm sure there's plenty who are with me on that, but there are also plenty who enjoy the other controllers as well. We're curious as to which controller is the most popular at this time, so make sure to drop those comments down below. To start things off, let's break down the exact role of the controllers. Like we mentioned earlier, controllers really shine at slicing up territory. In simpler terms, each controller has abilities to help to block off vision from your enemies. For example, all 4 of the current controllers have smokes that they can throw down, which is the primary ability you'll be using to block off this vision. By smoking off certain parts of the map, enemies will have a harder time of finding a position where they can spot you and shoot you. This then makes it easier for you and your team to push onto a site or defend a site. Enemies can decide to push through the smokes, but this will be a very risky maneuver as they won't be able to see what's outside of the smoke and therefore will have difficulty positioning their crosshair appropriately. This then makes them easy targets to kill, which is why smokes are incredibly valuable at slowing enemies down. Each controller also has other abilities to help divide areas of the map, which we'll dive into shortly, but the main ability you absolutely want to be using is the smokes. Without blocking off enemy vision on certain parts of the map, your team is forced to check multiple angles to clear a site, making it harder to commit to fights and win them. Similarly, if you don't smoke off areas on the defender side either, you're giving up complete control to the attackers to do as they please without being slowed down. So case in point, make sure you use your smokes every round and get as many smokes as you can each round so you can fulfill your role to the best of your ability and block off that vision. We want to end this section off by noting that it's incredibly difficult to play on both the attacker and defender sides without having those smokes to block off vision. Particularly, not having smokes on the attacker side is very challenging due to the reasons that we just stated. As a controller, you want to be playing further back from your teammates so you can set up your abilities. Once you've used up your abilities, that's when you can play more aggressively and push through with your team for the site take. Speaking of pushing through, if you want to push yourself to the max and improve at incredible speed, then make sure to go to SkillCapped.com to unlock our hyper improvement system that will teach you everything you need to blast through the rankings in Valorant. The link will be provided in the description below. With that being said, when should we use our smokes and where should we smoke? On attacker side, you're mainly going to be using smokes when your team is about to go for a site hit. In order to figure out where to smoke, you want to think about where the enemies could rotate from and where some of the enemies may be playing on the site. For example, on the A side of Bind, some common positions that players may play at are Heaven, U-Haul, and close to showers. As a result, these are good places that you want to throw your smokes down before your team tries to push a site. This will obscure the enemy vision, making it easier for you to attack the site while facing less enemies. You then just have to focus on any remaining players that still have vision of you, and if you achieve that, then you're good for taking the site and getting the spike down. Now, some controllers have more smokes than others, and you may be able to block off everything you want to. On others though, you won't have as many smokes to use and you'll have to prioritize more. The way to do this is to try to find where the enemies are positioned at and smoke those areas out. If they don't give you that information though, then you want to try to smoke off positions where you think the enemies are most likely to be at. This could be determined by finding out where the enemies were playing in previous rounds. On the defender side, the thought process is similar, but you want to try to gather more information prior to throwing your smokes down. The main way of finding this information is by listening to sound. If you hear enemies pushing close to you, then that's a good time to throw a smoke in the choke point that they're about to push. This will help to slow them down, or if the enemy pushes through it anyway, they'll be at a massive disadvantage due to the lack of vision when they come out, which will make for easy kills for you. Your team may also communicate information on where the enemies are coming from, in which you then want to also get into a safe position to set up a smoke for them. These are the 2 prime ways to smoke areas off with information. Now, there may be times where the enemies are pushing fast and you don't have time to react and throw the smoke down. In these scenarios, you want to set up your smokes earlier so that the enemy can't fully bamboozle you from the get-go. Now that we've got the basics out of the way, let's take a look at how we can utilize each controller to fulfill the roles we just mentioned. First up, we have Brimstone, who is arguably one of the easiest controllers to use and one that we highly suggest practicing with first before moving on to the other controllers. Brimstone has 3 smokes, which is the most out of any controller. Along with that, these smokes are very easy to use. All you have to do is press E and Brimstone will take out his iPad. You then just click on where you want to smoke and bam, done, easy peasy. By having so many smokes, it's really easy for Brimstone to take a site. For most sites, we recommend using just 2 smokes to go in and saving the 3rd smoke to use later on to further stall out the enemy while you're defending the spike. You typically don't need 3 to push in. For example, on Bind, you can place 1 smoke in Heaven and 1 smoke between Truck and Pocket to block off the right side of the site. You can then push in and overwhelm anyone who's on the left side in U-Haul and have the site easy. Brimstone also has his ultimate orbital strike and Molotov that is great for area denial. If you run out of smokes, a Molotov Molotov can be just as good for blocking a push from the enemy, and you should definitely use it when you hear enemies approaching. To be a super annoying controller when the spike is planted, you can save your ultimate and Molotov to prevent the players from defusing. If you hear the enemy tap the spike, you can trigger orbital strike from afar to get them off it. From there, you can quickly peek and shoot your Molotov down to delay the defuse further. With these three abilities, Brimstone is incredibly powerful at denying enemy vision and territory. We recommend using Brimstone smokes first and saving the Molotov and ultimate for later on in the round to further deny your enemy. Brimstone's final ability is Stim Beacon, which increases the firing rate of any allies that are in its vicinity. This is good to use when you're about to get into fights, but do note that the increased firing rate can be trickier to control. Some players aren't used to it and it can throw them off, so make sure to communicate to your team if they want it or not. Some players like it, but some also prefer not to have it. It's not a crucial ability to use to fulfill the controller role though, so not a big deal if you don't find yourself using it often. Next we have Omen, who is arguably one of the most popular controllers at the moment. Like we said, each controller has a smoke, but some of them have a twist to it like Omen's. Omen smokes can be placed within a large vicinity. You can bring the smokes further by pressing left click and closer by pressing right click. This is really good at blocking enemy vision, but also playing mind games with the enemy. For example, you can smoke out areas just like you did with Brimstone, but you can also plan to push onto the A site, but instead you throw your smokes down to B to fake the enemy out. We recommend mostly using your smokes to hit the site like you usually would, but occasionally doing this instead can psych the enemy out and confuse them on where your team is trying to go. One important thing to note is Omen smokes do take time to travel to their designated spot and trigger, so make sure you don't push on too fast before the smokes can pop, or you may find yourself getting caught off guard. Now, I mentioned earlier that some players may like to ignore your smokes and push right through them. This is going to be much harder to do against an Omen because you can actually enter and see inside Omen smokes. If anyone tries to go through an Omen smoke, you can easily punish them by pushing through it first before they do. The remainder of Omen's kit are really for splitting up the enemies. For example, Omen's Paranoia will send a straight blind into an area, forcing players to back off, and this gives you more room to push through. Omen's Teleport can also be used to make aggressive pushes that can help cut enemies off. For example, you can throw your smokes just like you normally would on the A side of Vine, and then if you know the enemy plays further back, you can teleport the triple box to catch rotators off guard. If the coast is clear there, you can also teleport up to heaven and catch late rotators off too. Taking this control again divides up the site and allows the rest of your team to focus their attention elsewhere. It does take time before you can move after teleporting though, so make sure that no one is close by when you do so, or you're gonna be dead meat. If you want to do this on easy mode, Omen's ultimate allows you to teleport to anywhere on the map. You'll want to typically use this to get into the back of enemy lines and flank them. This will again split up the enemy's focus and force them to divide up to kill you before they can go back onto the site. If done properly, you can really be annoying with this ability and cause enemies to have to backtrack and waste time. Our next controller is none other than Viper, who has significantly risen in popularity since her recent buffs. Luckily for us, her abilities are still used the same way as before. Viper has the least smokes out of all the controllers, however she still has a wall that allows her to obscure vision. Viper is one of the exceptions to the rule where you actually want to use her wall as the main way of blocking enemy vision. The good news is you want to apply these same principles as you would with smokes when using the wall. Identify the choke point that you want to cover and then line up Viper's wall so that it covers it up. For example, we smoked out the middle of the site with Brimstone and Omen. This time we can use the wall to divide the site and achieve the same goal and then some. This is also really easy to do as the wall can go through objects. After setting up the wall, you can press the ability to bring the wall up and then press it again to bring it down. You only have a certain amount of fuel to use Viper's smoke and wall though, so keep track of this to ensure that you can use it for the appropriate time that you need it for. Viper also has a smoke that can be used to block off any remaining choke points such as U-Haul or Heaven. You can actually set these smokes ahead of time, which is really useful on the defender side where you can position it where you like and then set it off whenever you hear enemies approaching or you want to stop the enemy from pushing at those moments. Like Brimstone, Viper has a Molotov that works in a similar fashion. Again, mostly used when you don't have smokes available to block out that enemy vision, or if you have the spike down and want to use it to delay the defenders. Lastly, we have Viper's ultimate, Viper's Pit, which engulfs an area with toxins and anyone who steps into it will take decay damage and be walking into unknown territory. As a general rule of thumb, Viper's Pit is best used after the spike has been planted or on a choke point on defense where you suspect the enemy will push. Both are effective in causing the enemy to second guess and hesitate on whether they want to still go towards you or avoid you. And lastly, moving into our final controller, we have Astra. Now, as a fair warning, Astra is arguably one of the hardest controllers to use because she relies so heavily on teamwork. During fights, she's typically busy in her astral form and setting up plays, and therefore she ends up late into the actual action. Because of this, Astra's abilities will benefit her teammates much more than it will for herself, so keep this in mind when playing her. Astra has up to 5 stars that she can put down, but with every controller, the main star she wants to use is going to be the smokes. To use any of her abilities, you need to place a star in her astral form. Once the star is placed, you can trigger one of her abilities on her star, which includes a smoke, gravity wall which sucks players in, and Nova Pulse which concusses players in the area. Only 2 smokes, 1 gravity well, and 1 nova pulse can be up at a time. However, they can be used for more than these numbers as the abilities will regenerate over time. Astra smokes are similar to Omens where you have vision inside of it. You can therefore use it in a similar fashion to punish players for disrespecting the smoke. The main goal though is really to stall enemies, and you're going to use this ability just like we've discussed before to block off those choke points prior to your attack hit, or to block off choke points to prevent the attackers from pushing. Nova pulse and gravity wall are where things are going to be tricky as the timing of these abilities has to be perfect. For beginners, we recommend trying to place stars ahead of time in areas where you think enemies may push. Once you hear them getting close, you want to trigger these abilities to mess up the enemy's movement and aim and allow for an easy kill. You can trigger stars from anywhere though, so make sure to listen to any team communication, and even if you're on the opposite side, you can trigger a smoke or another ability to slow players in their track. We recommend focusing on smoke placement though, as the other abilities are much more challenging to utilize. And finally, we have Astra's ultimate Cosmic Divide, which creates an insane wall that cuts straight down the map at whatever angle you please. Anyone behind the wall won't be able to hear any sounds that are beyond it. It works both ways, but mainly to your advantage as the enemy won't know what you're trying to do. You also cannot shoot through the wall, so you'll feel safe knowing that you won't get randomly spammed from it. We recommend using Cosmic Divide in 2 ways. One is just like a Viper wall, where you cut off part of the site so you have less area to focus on. The other is to wall horizontally down, which allows your team to run around freely to a certain site without the enemy knowing. From there, you'll be fully gathered up and able to overwhelm the enemy without them being able to rotate in time. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, make sure to comment down below on which controller is your favorite to play. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get more premium guides just like this one with one goal in mind: helping you become a better player. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next. I'm Dr. Zora, and good luck out there.